Nomad List too. You might. That's my favorite site of where to look for places around the world. If you're thinking about having children, then you really want to be moving first, because you can't do these things once it happens. Okay, so business models. What our current thinking is that yes, we need to generate baseload. Like, we want to be at the point where we're selling computation. We think we've got this model that can allow us to build software with a higher profitability than conventional means, just because of the amount of labor is reduced, the feature set's expanded, and we think we have a model for widespread collaborative work with less collisions. Where's the best place to use that? Obviously, if it was popular, we wouldn't have to do anything. We could just, we're good, right? But at the start, the things that work best are not selling software directly, but rather acquiring companies. So, for example, with you take a small company that's got maybe, $5 million a year in revenue, and if we analyze that company, you can see that much like this CRM thing, that there's an opportunity to make a piece of software that immediately reduces the back office headcount by, say, 3. Straight away, we've added in Canadian dollars anywhere from 150 to 200k a year onto the balance sheet. And so being able to acquire these companies, particularly in a downturn, seems like not only a feasible thing to do, but also a quicker path to revenue, much more so than, say, trying to knock on the door and sell people software and convince them of all this and that. Plus, by taking over the company at a shareholder level, we can implement the changes that we want to adapt to the software, and we can sort of force the trial period on people, if you like. But more than that, it can allow us to make software that's open source and still get revenue from it without being worried that someone's going to run off. We may need to place geographic restrictions on the open sourceness, like, hey, in this geographical zone, you can't use this software, but everywhere else is completely open. Things like that. But the point is that the acquisition model seems a better use of the properties of the system that we want. It's a great time to be doing acquisitions because there's high inflation, low unemployment. The cost of borrowing money is really high. It's a great time to be elastic, I think. And conventional companies are inelastic, and the price of making software conventionally in such an environment is horrific. So, we think this model can work. So let's acquire companies. So the first one will be testing out this, doing that on the customers of the CRM, where it's sort of that model would be softwareizing their current operation and then acquiring other operations around them, both their competitors and other geographic regions that have a similar model to what they run. And so the software is more or less a direct drop-in. But more importantly, there's like a ton of little apps that sort of sit there that everyone's like, I wish I had this thing and that thing. And you kind of don't get that opportunity when you're outside the company. And so being at the shareholder level would allow us to modernize the business in a way that a customer of ours would never allow or never want to entertain. At the same time, every time that we develop a piece of software that modernizes the operation, that software is saleable around the world as well. So you've got this revenue stream from the operation of the company, plus a revenue stream of the software coming in. And then as we acquire more similar businesses, we can start to unbundle the functions within those businesses, like the call center function. So, for example, we can start selling that function as an independent consumable thing on its own into businesses that aren't even really that related, but need that function. And so we basically want to turn workforces into APIs and then allow that to be elastic and sort of spawn out in that way. At the same time, having company stock, controlling shares in companies, listing on a public exchange, and having demonstrable revenue companies as part of your bundle of value, I suppose, is a much easier value determination than, hey, we've got this slide deck and a great idea. So this sort of the test the theory on a small scale and then list publicly with that model, and then we can use the public company stock as the acquisition or part of the acquisition tool, because each new company increases the value in a defendable way. As that grows, we can raise finance against our public stock price and then use some of that finance to acquire more companies and sort of rinse and repeat whilst having access to public markets. And I think that's a better, more defendable position than, hey, we sold some software to these guys. It's like, hey, we own this revenue stream from these customers who don't care about the software really. They care about the service they're receiving from the company. And that seems much more solid to me.
It's capital intensive.
Well, but I mean, like, the amount of money that we raised just to build blockchains was enough to build 10 mines, like gold, silver, platinum. Like, those mines are like, you can start a junior mining exploration for a couple million. We raised 17. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's not capital intensive when it's for things with a stable value, right? Like an operating, running company. That I believe you can have for cheap these days, just by sort of, anecdotally looking around and talking to people.
Right. So the other thing is, like, you're kind of allowing more voices into the pool of controlling interests.
Yes, and that's not too bad, provided we set the charter up right. And because the company is open source, everything it produces is open, not just its software, but its state, so its books, it's everything. That aligns very well with public company reporting. And
I would almost argue you probably want to build the platform in a way where it becomes the standard of public reporting.
Yeah, yeah. There's an interesting quirk when I was dealing with some of the exchanges where you can actually run into trouble from being too public. So if everything's open state, you still need to press release down the press release channel when anything significant happens. So it's not you can't just be fully open and then not do press releases. You still need to
Right.
interpret the information you're seeing and be like, look, new information, just to stay clear of the regulators claiming that you tipped off part of the market as opposed to the whole market. But that's the overall suggestion, and the place that I was going to start was by, oddly enough, starting an IT company, because the couple of the businesses that we already deal with are having big problems with their IT services suppliers, and the problem is really the switchableness of the IT solutions in your company. So you feel like you've got this open market, you select your IT supplier, and then you're sort of stuck with them, and you kind of have to just take whatever they say, and there's no internal market. And if they have resource constraints, therefore you have resource constraints. If they choose something bad, you've chosen something bad. And so with the shareholder level control that we have already, we think that we can make a Dreamcatcher model IT services company that makes the architectural status of the company open and public, so that the configuration of the enterprise can be scrutinized publicly. Obviously, it hides sensitive data, but it basically makes the solution public, and the pricing of the project work to transition the company from state to state public. And so why that's important is that if we go down this acquisition path, which I'm getting pretty excited about, to be honest, because it seems like an easy win. It's way less hassle than some of the other models we've looked at. And then, but to do that, you need to displace the IT company, because if you're going to softwareize the business, you need to be able to turn up with your own crew effectively.
Yeah. You're basically like cannibalizing their back end and replacing it with yours.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And then working on cannibalizing their departments and consolidating them into API accessible human engines, I guess, human functions.
I would be more worried about like the success prospect there, because like I think a lot of companies will have unbundled and gone to like service providers for all of their sub functions anyway.
No.
No, you think a lot of companies still have their own call center?
Yeah, well, they do, and they don't really realize it. Like, they're too small to need a dedicated call center, and so they've got like one or two staff that, along with their other duties, also answer calls.
Right.
And if you can reduce the workload on the staff, you can reduce the headcount, and if you can keep the quality up, if you can basically start making the departments within the company communicate with each other via API instead of like an unstructured email with a poorly filled out spreadsheet, then you can start to disperse the staff, and that the staff are the biggest cost of that company. And it's more about finding a way to optimize human labor. But there's better ways to organize ourselves than I see in a lot of these companies. And I think what you're saying is that, you know, sure, there's companies that have started down that path with varying degrees of success, but in an acquisitions model, you can pick the ones that look great to you. Like ideally, you want ones that are really unadvanced. We think they've got potential, and better yet, if we could see, say, 3 different companies, like say there's one in BC, Calgary, and maybe some straggler off in Seattle that look like the same, completely independently owned, and we're like, well, if we could pick up all 3 of them, we can get this shared cost benefit that's otherwise not available to them. And so, you know, straight away we can add another 100K a year onto the bottom line. And I think that building up in that way with many small businesses is sort of a better target market, because if you have a system that you can develop software cheaper and faster, small business is a wildly underserved market for custom software.
And also, like, that's so depressing to me. I always think of it as like, what if the company that made Uber, all the devs that made the Uber app, like made it like an open taxi kit that taxi companies and cities could buy? We'd probably have a more resilient outcome, just ecologically speaking, right? Like you'd have, instead of one company that captured the entire industry and is now dying, you'd have everybody kind of ticking along at the same growth, Like, it does also sort of suggest what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like a good strategy for doing it is to find different businesses with a common core, like, set of behaviors, basically, right?
Yeah, and then once you can get that sort of little fire going, you can sort of provide a takeover kit for other people to go around and do their own acquisitions, because it's not about us being in control. It's really just about us showing what a decentralized business model can look like, and then us making money from it, and everyone else is like, oh, we can do that too, and like, go.
Now, like, growth by acquisition is something we've been trying to do in this company, and I'll tell you, the thing that makes it fail more often than not is personal factors. People who don't match, people who don't have, like, it basically onboarding people in a way that they understand the vision and understand how to, like, live inside that vision properly.
It sounds like you acquired companies that didn't have an existing solid revenue stream. Is that fair to
That's
say?
right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people. A lot of people are workers. Like, they turn up to their work and they do something that could be a computer but isn't. And it's those kinds of companies that we want, right? We're not interested in startups with this grand vision that are trying to change the world. Like, that's worthless. We want guaranteed revenue streams, simple things.
Yeah, I mean, and like, because they would have already optimized around that revenue stream, there's probably like a lot less cultural, like.
Well, the vision's dead. The vision's dead, right? It's become what's the word? All its potential has been realized, and it's now sort of doing this thing. We have a way to get more potential out of it. They don't. And a lot of them will be just happy for a payday. They're like, I can't wait to get out. I've been running this treadmill for 20 years. So
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting plan. Do you have, like, would you start with 1, or would you try to do like 5?
2 at a time. So the first round is 2, just to sort of understand how much overlap I can get between 2 companies that seem different, right? But then they're sort of also not that different. They all use Excel, they all use email, they all pay too much for their IT services, they all, all these things, and so they all have a sort of an offline requirement. Some of them may need tablets and trucks, others need little Android-powered scanning guns in a warehouse. They look very different, but the software's the same. It's that offline tolerant mobile device. It's not really that different, I don't think.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what we're going for. At the same time, we've got Scott overseas is doing the same model in a different way by taking. So he's found a handful of defunct startups. So startups that had funding, had customers lined up. Some of them have small amounts of revenue, but they were, because of their inability to balance the books, they were kind of dead before they knew it. Like they didn't really know how to track run rate or did even like the basic stuff, right? And so they're actually they were dead and they didn't know it. And then the board's like all surprised, like, oh my god, how did this happen? And you're like, well, you can kind of see at a very quick glance how that happened. And they seem surprisingly receptive to our model because they've tried it the conventional way. They've given away a bunch of like their cap tables are just, they look like a toilet. Like they're just, and like there's also like a bunch of people that think they've been promised stock and aren't even on the registered cap table. So you're like, what? Like I'm like, what were you selling? And so those kinds of companies seem to have, he's having really good success there. So that's, he's trying to do acquisition by, I guess, takeover, more than.
But don't you end up with all of their mats?
No, because they crash. It's a limited liability company. The best employees are pulled out. And then a new round of funding is started with like adults on the board, and then off they go. So he's currently in a round of funding for a company at the moment doing just that. Like the thing crashed. They took the core connections, dumped the code base, and then took off again, right? All the wiser for it. So that's the avenue he's pursuing. I'm going to pursue this acquisition thing because I think it suits. Like I'm still flabbergasted at how many lessons I've learned just from trying to build a content addressable system for a simple small company. It's been more than like what were we burning? Like about $1 million a month on salaries, and we still didn't learn half the stuff that I've learned from actually just trying to do a simple, small CRM. Like, we did not need all that stuff, and I'm embarrassed to say that we wasted so many people's money, but this has been very, very fruitful. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I thought about a lot when I took this project over. Is like doing things because people need them seems like a pre-optimized way of working in software. Like I think a lot of software dies because like people don't like pare down what they're working on enough. They don't limit it to things that are actually just useful.
Yeah, and like a company with a revenue stream where you're targeting on optimizing that revenue stream and expanding it gradually, incrementally, those are good, solid examples of how to have a very clear target for your software that has an end. And then, there's an element of, okay, if we manage to successfully softwareize a particular company, go find other ones that are like it. Maybe they want the software too. If we can demonstrate cost savings, if we have full access to the books, which we do, then the case study has a whole lot more weight, because you can actually talk to the financial people with open books, and you're like, these are the cost benefits. Do you need to see more?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty reasonable plan, actually.
And I don't think it compromises our long-term goals, but in the short term, it's a great way to develop credibility. Just because I am never going to raise up a slide deck again. Like, I just can't. Like, I just don't want to do it. Like, it's just mostly because of the fact that there's no way to make a slide deck that gets interpreted correctly, and there's no way to avoid a call in 6 months' time of like, oh, I thought you were doing this, and you're like, that's not what I said.
Right.
You shouldn't have jumped to that conclusion, but here we are. So,
Yeah, I mean, it occurred to me more than once in all this that wouldn't it be nice if software somehow was still able to, like, you could still just grow businesses by, offering things of value rather than pretending that you're going to make the most important and biggest thing in the entire world to a bunch of people. If you could
there is no such thing. And just little incremental things is overall the most important thing. If you made a system that could produce that for people fairly, that's a big thing. The everyday pieces that it solves are not and should not be big things. That model, being able to produce software for prepaid packets. So basically the model that we use for IPOM, we would be doing the same. So we'd be identifying packets that we want, negotiating with the market for pricing on those packets, and then seeing how we go. That's a way for income to be earned before revenue has been earned. And a way for investors who are allowed to or qualified to can actually prepay for a packet. A lot of these companies have money that they can spend on investment, and so being able to preload some packets with some funding, not all of which have to reach activation price point. Like if they're sort of at a third of what we think activation is, then we'll just go find other companies that you need 3 others and you can hit activation. So that's about it. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we flick over to personal stuff?
I don't think so. I mean, it seems pretty clear to me.
Okay. Any better ideas?
Me? No. I like the one part I do worry about is just like when you're buying someone out, you're gonna be like more or less buying them out completely, right?
What do you mean?
Like, I think you're gonna find that the more success you have with the model, the more people want, like, not cash, equity instead, right? Like, want to be on the other side, right?
I doubt that, but if they did want equity more than cash, that would be better.
It'd be better, but doesn't that give them more ability to, like, it seems like such a fragile thing to, like, get right for the first couple of rows,
No, because the shares would not be controlling. So and they'd never get a big enough chunk to be controlling. So it's safe in that way.
So where are the controlling shares? There's just like, I assume, like a small amount of them held in some kind of.
Are you talking about an individual company or the sort of the central vehicle?
Yeah, the parent company.
The parent company. Small number of tightly held large shareholdings with a small public float, maybe 20-25% public float, and then reissuing equity each time there's an acquisition. The equity is cheaper than the cash, so it's public. You'd need more than you need more than a certain percentage to be able to have a vote or to be able to push someone on the board. You need to declare when you hold more than 20%, so it's pretty safe.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem, if you're talking about non-controlling equity, then it doesn't seem like there's a hole in the thing at all.
Yeah, and then there's like there's software assets that are being produced during that time. They're all open source, so they're not subject to the same stickiness you find yourself in. They're always forkable, and then we would periodically pay out on the software assets to empty the asset list in a way so that no one gets this funny idea like they're gonna. But we want the company's value to be based on the revenue streams that it's getting, not on the speculation on the value of a piece of software. So paying out the packets, basically clearing out all the attribution centers for those packets is kind of where we want to be, I think.
Stopping speculation sounds like such a good idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where everything seems to fall apart. So, yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah, let's hop over to person.